All right, welcome to the NBAA.US radio network. We are broadcasting live for our very first 8 p.m. show. I want to welcome you to the show. My name is Matt Dennis, and this is the pretrial supervision discussion. We are the NBAA, the National Bail Agents Association of America, and we provide you with hopefully a communication link to the rest of the world, an ability to speak and to get your message to others throughout our country. The message that I think should go out, the message of who we are, what we stand for, and what we protect exactly. We started this network, the NBAA.US radio network, nearly a month ago, and we did it, well, we actually started it many years ago, but the radio broadcast is fairly new. We have produced many videos, many hours of videos, many hours of content as it relates to information relative to bail, to pretrial release, to accountability. But our conversation has changed over the years due to a thing called bail reform. And what I mean by changed is we've been challenged, I think, in our industry, in the bail industry, to be more specific about what it is we are. If we don't take the time to inform the public what it is that the bail industry does, then I think that the bail industry will go away by huge mistake. I think it will go away. I think that the American people must learn exactly what bail protects, or you will lose bail. But at the same time, part of what I've learned over the last couple of days of talking, bail has to be prepared to change. I've spoke to a person who I know, a deputy for a long time, turned constable, had to be elected, and he won by a wide margin. And he beat a person who had been in office for a very long time. And I bring that up because, I do value his opinion. I do like to hear what his opinion and what his belief of things are. And the truth is, what he saw, what actually I had connected him to, was a post on Facebook by a bondsman who was questioning a certain sheriff and whether or not that sheriff should have been holding somebody until the next day to facilitate an ROR. And without knowing all of the extreme facts, it allowed me to take some time to talk to the constable and to discuss with him, his opinions on certain issues relative to bail. And, some of his opinions were pretty harsh. I mean, not so much, negative of bail, obviously, but at the same time, I think that he had an honest outsider read. He comes from a belief that bail, of today, what we know of bail, what we recognize in bail, may be due for some big changes, maybe on its way out. Now, he comes from a different belief on certain things than I do. I think that there's a certain amount of truth to his position. His position was that bail is going to change tremendously, that the need for the money part of bail is going to go away, and that we're going to see a change in the way the society deals with risk, and that potentially risk assessments could replace the need for money bail. Now, when I pressed him further, when I said, well, what happens when these risk mitigators prove fruitless? What happens? I mean, he said, well, then you would go to that advanced level. Well, and I get that, and I kind of tend to agree. But the next question is, well, what happens if the mitigators, the risk mitigators, want to do away with the next level? They want to eliminate accountable solutions like private choice. Is there a place in our criminal justice system for that? And he had, his answers had to do more with political science than constitutional protections. Excuse me. And that was deliberate. His belief was that we don't really have to worry about the protection of the Constitution once you're elected. All you have to worry about is getting reelected. And the number one way to do that is to worry about money. You're going to have to collect money for reelection and learn to save money and show that, or whatever. How can you make a budget work? So they don't really care about justice at the end of the day. They care about the dollar and how the dollar works in their system. And what the truth facing bail today has nothing to do with accountability or constitutionality or freedom or protecting the rights of poor. It has to do with shifting the finances away from the private industry and back into the criminal justice system, and essentially back into the elected officials' hands. And that the people that hate bail, the people that are promoting bail reform, the reason they're doing so well is they're making the promise to return the money to the criminal justice system, to return the money to your elected official, the money that you're currently taking in your industry. So they're just trying to shift it, and that's how they're winning, by promising to shift that funding over. So his suggestion to me was that bail's right way to win this argument is not to actually try to have a common sense discussion, but try to outbid these people. Try to, the 2% and the 3% and the riders on the bonds, which is why the people that are trying to get rid of you are attacking those fees. And what he's speaking of is the recent SPLC article that came out that made the claim that bondsmen are overcharging people in the city of New Orleans because of some extra percentage. And, what's so sad about the whole thing is the press, and the press can't pretend like they're not informed. The actual person that wrote the article knows enough about the issue that he didn't have to write that very deceiving headline. He introduced it as bondsmen are basically ripping the people off. And he did that at the behest of the SPLC. And unfortunately, that's what our media has become. They're no longer about truth or just getting to the bottom of something. They're just going to be biased. And he can say he's not biased. I appreciate that he would say that he's not biased. But the truth is, the title is wrong. There's nobody charging people more. The state has a process that's in place. The parish or county in Louisiana has the process in place. And the bondsmen pay that process. In other words, when a bondsman in the city of New Orleans goes to the Orleans Parish Jail, the sheriff says, I need a check for this amount of money for the 3%. I need a check for this amount of money for the jail fee. I need a check for this amount of money for the processing fee. There's also a check that has to go to a clerk's office for this amount of money for typing the bond. These fees are added on by all of these processes. These aren't fees that the bondsman's adding on. They're certainly not fees that the bondsman's collecting. So the SPLC files a complaint that the bondsman's charging 3%. The bondsman's not charging 3%, the sheriff is. The bondsman is simply giving the sheriff the 3% from the defendant. It's the defendant's money, and it's going to the sheriff. When the defendant gets their receipt, they get a receipt for 10%, plus the $10 typing fee, and the $54 for the jail fee, and the processing fee, plus the 3% for the 3% fee. So that's why it's 13% plus jail fee and typing fee, because the state and the county wants their cut. Now, so remember, my constable friend says that that's the way you want to go. You want to increase that revenue source because, look, they're going to vote for the biggest stream of money. They're not going to vote for what's right. They're not going to vote for what's constitutional. They're not going to vote for what protects society. They're going to vote for what provides them the greatest revenue stream. They're going to talk and they're going to banter and they're going to, puff their chests up over whatever. But at the end of the day, it has to do with the revenue. The fact that people like the Vera Institute and the Arnold Foundation and all these activist groups, they attack this revenue that the judges are collecting. I know that they have in Louisiana fiercely. They've attacked the 3%, the 2%, the jail fees and such as a hook to keep the judges in our corner. But at the same time, they are trying to provide a revenue hook the same way to get the judges in their corner. So they're complaining about potentially our hook while trying to create their own hook in the judge under the same conditions to bring the judge over for financial purposes. And this is what I have to say. My constable friend believes that our fight should be centered on creating the greatest amount of revenue for the criminal justice system, and that's how you stay in control, and that we should not try to focus on right or wrong, or constitutional, or protections, or accountability, or any of that, because none of that they really care about. And my statement to that is scary. Boy, I hope that's really not where we're at. Is that what our politics has created? And when did this get created? Why is this? And another interesting person that I talked to is a person who I've known for 30 years. He's been in jail a number of times. Okay, and I'm actually going to be interviewing this person. He's going to do an interview, and bail's not going to like what he has to say. I don't like what he has to say, and everything that he has to say. He is a person who has been in prison, and he has a take on criminal justice that it's all about profit. And that, he said something to me. I said, well, how do we stop a drunk driver? How do we stop a person from driving drunk? And he said, well, you won't. The minute you stop a drunk driver, thousands of people lose their jobs. From the deputies to the judges, to the clerks, to the jailers. And, I don't know exactly how true that statement is, but there is some truth in that statement. At what point is much of what we do criminal justice-wise for profit? And not just in bail, because he talks about, they just sent him, he just recently got out of prison in January. This is almost a 50-year-old man. He spent, a good portion of his life from 16 to 50 in prison because of drinking, not because of anything. He didn't kill anybody either. And right or wrong, that's what our society has dictated. And the question is it right or wrong? So my question to him was, is there a place for bail? And he's caught. He doesn't really know how to answer that question. Because from the inside looking out, this is all punitive. Anytime you would have to free yourself financially at the innocent till proven guilty stage is questionable, per him. Now I've asked him, well, what do you think about the effects on the part of society that doesn't do this? And his answer was, the only difference between me and a person who's never had a drunk driving charge is I got caught. And there's some validity to that. He got caught once when he was 16. I know this because I remember it. And it was a long time ago. And did that create a death spiral for his future? Was it the next one that created it? And that the first one made it worse because he had a history now? He did hit a spiral that he couldn't get out of. And this many years later, I have to be curious. Is there any validity to his claim that the system was designed to keep him in it? Because there's an enormous amount of money to be made. That, getting out of jail costs him money. Getting arrested cost him money at the innocent till proven guilty. Once found guilty, it cost him money. He went to jail, it cost him money. While in jail, it cost him money. Getting out of jail cost him money. Staying out of jail cost him money. To this day, he pays every week into his supervision fund with the county to be out of jail. If he fails to pay it, he goes back to jail where he has to pay to stay in jail. To get out of jail early on the type of programs offered, he has to be caught up on his jail fund. That it's all about money. At all aspects, all stages, there's nothing in there that truly offers him correction. There's plenty of programs that are available, but they all cost him money. Then to get into these programs, he has to pay for them. So he's curious, where in the system do they care about money? Why is bail the place they care about money? And I asked him the question, because I have a valid question. I don't dislike lawyers, but where is their responsibility in bail reform? Do they have any responsibility in bail reform? Do they have any reason to care about what we, why can a lawyer turn down a person that can't pay them if it's about equal justice? If it's isn't equal access to justice? I mean, they say that a poor person can't get out, and that's not fair. I think to agree with that, wouldn't we agree that a poor person can't get representation? And that's not fair. But they would say, no, they can't get representation. It's not free. They're forced to pay even when it's free. He said that his public defender cost him. And if he didn't pay it, he didn't get it. So, that's like divorce defense. Why do they get the second or third or fourth rate defense? And they still have to pay for it. I mean, there's still a process of paying. But he doesn't get access to a quality defense. He said that the average number of times he would meet with a lawyer before trial was 1 or 2 or 3, and usually no more than 10 minutes. And it was almost always about what was he going to plead to and how much jail time he was going to do. That they never actually listened to what he had to say or cared. It was just about pleading. He said the first time he went, he could afford the lawyer, and they actually paid for a lawyer, and he got much lower charges. But after that, there was never a chance that he could afford the lawyer, because by increasing the number of charges, the lawyers get to double or more the rate of defense. So almost instantly, he was unable to get any real defense, only because he had been charged in the past. Is that fair? And that's a good question. When we talk about reform, and reform's based on poor, he asked, well, how is that possible when you start paying from the minute you get accused? All the way through the minute you finish your sentence. He said if your sentence is complete and you're out, why do you still have to pay? How come they can take money from you when you're in jail? I mean, they charge you to be there. But he said, but they complain about money on the front end? He was curious to know about the preventative detention. I asked him, what happens if on one of these cases, because he had said, that, well, there was a case when he got caught that they set his bond at $30,000, and he spent a number of months in jail. Excuse me. I asked him, well, you eventually got out, right? And he said, yes. He lowered his bond and they let him bond out. So I asked him, that wasn't keeping you. The judge, he said, yeah, but the judge didn't want me out. That's why he set my bond so high. I said, okay, let me ask you a question. What if the judge doesn't want you out and he's not required to set a bond? See, the judge set a bond high, but he still couldn't be unreasonable. He couldn't do $1 million or $100,000. He set it at $30,000. That's what he told me. And that was $3,000 in the state that he was in jail. And that's a lot of money. And he said, I didn't have it. I couldn't get his grandparents, couldn't help him. But he was also, fourth, fifth time. So it wasn't like he was new to this. And he knows that. He agrees with that. But he said it was high to be punitive, to punish him. And he was curious, how is that possible if I'm innocent till proven guilty? Now, there is the guy from the accused side saying, I don't like that it hurt me, but I would like to see justice carried out for the rest of society. But when it came to what he was paying for, he questioned whether or not that high bond was fair. Now, my question to him in return was, what happens if the judge could have just said, you know what? I'm going to make it hard. I'm going to tell you no bond, and I'm going to hold him. Now, interestingly, his response was, well, that happened to me on the next go-round. The judge said, you're too much risk. I'm going to hold you. And we discussed it, and it lasted about 10 days. 10 days later, they set a bond, and he was able to bond out. What happened after we discussed it was that they had probable cause type hearings. They had hearings to set bond, and they had a bail hearing. So while the judge used the law to allow them to slow the process of release down, the process was still required a bond be made available. And at one point, that did happen. He made the bond, and he did get out pre-trial. Now, again, he questions the need for bail at all if you're innocent till proven guilty, but he also conceded that there is a need to protect society as a whole, even if society may consist of people who have simply not been caught drinking and driving. He agreed, but there is a place in the conversation where I think he and I both agreed that so much of criminal justice is driven on rehabilitative issues. That he would understand if criminal justice was driven on rape, robbery, things like that. But he said that criminal justice actually, its driver is addiction, drugs and alcohol, and that the people that are charged at the other end are liabilities to the system, not receivables, as he called them, monies received. The people that are going to do time are monies charged or lost, and that's why they've instituted all of these post-conviction costs, which brought him back around to ask me, why are they so concerned about the poor man at the front door when they're raping him daily after he's been convicted? And they never provided him the opportunity to defend himself in the first place. He said, even if I'm guilty, I'm supposed to get defended. And giving me a public defender is not defense. Why won't they give us those free if they want to let me go for free? He said, certainly, there's a better chance I don't get in more trouble if I'm not facing more charges. A good lawyer would get my charges to go away, thus protecting me better. If they're really worried about protecting me, why are they worried about letting me go for free? Maybe they should defend me for free. And I thought that was a big statement from him. And I thought that was very intriguing, to hear that. So I liked that. And we're going to do an interview with him. And like I said, bail, you're not going to like everything he says. He's not a fan of bail. He believes that he's paid a lot of money to bail. And he also believes that he shouldn't have had to. But some of the things that he says are pretty interesting and pretty thought-provoking. And the truth is, if we could refine a lot of what we say and do, there's a potential that we could become even more valuable to a more efficient and streamlined and protective criminal justice system. I really do like the idea of applying accountability at the right time and right place. I don't like the idea of bail being from day one necessarily, unless that person deserves that, unless the charges and the history require that. And I think that in some cases, especially in the lower city courts, the use of bail has been confused. Now, not a lot of bondsmen are going to like to hear that. But the truth of it is, the misdemeanor court system should have a mentality that gives you a couple of opportunities before you fall victim to being required to pay certain amounts of money, to receive your freedom pending trial. And I think that if the argument was centered on, truly looking at misdemeanors in a different light, then I don't think anybody would argue. But unfortunately, these groups say all money bail should go. And I'm sorry, I just cannot agree with that. All money bail is not the problem here. What is the problem here is a lack of accountability in much of the programs that they're trying to replace money bail with. And the fact, the bigger problem, the one thing that really gets to me is the fact that they're not really trying to change anything except where the money goes. You see, they're going to leave the money in the system. They're not going to take it out. They're not eliminating any costs for release. Up front, there might be that appearance, but after the cycle's through, after you cycle through the system, once you cycle through the New Mexico, stage where it's first being implemented, so it's a let them all go mentality. Then you cycle through the New Jersey stage, which is the oops, we shouldn't let them all go, we're going to hold a few more and start to advance preventative detention. Then you cycle to the far extent of the Kentucky model, which is where not only are they just keeping you flat out, but they've reinstituted this bail perception, this kind of idea that there's bail by saying, yeah, there's a $30,000 bond or a $2,500 bond. No, it's not. You got to pay that to the court. There's no middle ground. There's no ability for you to go, you know what, you're that much more risk. I'm going to apply a $2,500 bond. I'm going to let you go to a bondsman. Because the bondsman's it's going to kind of get the point across. It's going to guarantee that you appear while making it much more serious than what it was when we just let you go on your own signature. And then from there, the bonds just kind of go up, and you keep that level of accountability there. The bondsman's job is to be your conscience and tell you, if you don't go, we'll come get you. Okay? And that's a big motivator when you get to that level. Even the guy who we'll be interviewing, his name is Keith, by the way, he said at one point the bond becomes the only reason I go to court. So that's important, and I think that that's important for us to hear, because as much as he doesn't like to have to pay money to get out of jail, at least he understands the reason why he does, and that's really important to all of us. So I want to talk a little bit about the program. The new thing is today. the pretrial supervision discussion. It is a program that is going to be an hour-long program. We're going to try to talk about 2 to 3 topics each night. Our first topic today is some upcoming interviews, like I said, some discussions that we're having to gain more knowledge. It's not bail-driven knowledge. I don't want to just hear from bondsmen. We've been working really hard on gathering information and discussions and conversations from people from the criminal justice system, not just judges and lawyers, but constables and police officers and even firemen, because firemen find themselves on the scenes of domestic violence cases a lot. And they have questions, a lot of questions as to how people get out that we see over and over again. What can be done? What do we think can be done? And what do they think? And what it would mean to them if there was some level of intervention different than what they're seeing today. So it's a unique perspective of what a catch and release system does to a community. Because remember, if you're just going to keep casting them back in, somebody has to respond to whatever the problem is. And if you're just going to let it compound and build and build and build, then potentially you could be raising risk for innocent people. And some of those innocent people might be wearing uniforms, and they're not necessarily police officers. There's a lot of reasons why, fire and medical are called to what potentially could be dangerous situations involving drugs and alcohol. And it's important that we make sure that we pay attention to the mentality of people that we're letting go pre-trial. We can't let everybody get this untouchable idea, this belief that they can't be touched, that they can't be stopped. Okay, it's important. It's important that we ensure that everybody gets an opportunity to be protected equally, just as well as that the person's innocence is protected pre-trial, but that the innocents are protected pre-trial, because we can't just have a catch and release system. We just can't do it. And so our first part of today was to talk about some of the things that we're learning as we talk around. The second part is going to be a discussion that's more geared towards associations and the understanding of what associations do for our industry nationwide. First of all, the association concept, our National Bail Agents Association, NBAA.US, it's not a money organization. We don't ask for money to join. We're not trying to get your money. We're not holding conferences once or twice or any other times a year. We're not trying to sell you anything. We're not trying to buy anything. What we're trying to do is provide you an outlet where you can gain information, where we can gain education, where you can show others how to gain information and education. This is a communication hub. This is a way to talk, to discuss, to understand. I don't want to be the only one talking. I want to hear what you have to say. I want to ask you questions. I want to let you ask other people questions. And that's real important to me. Our first presentation on this program, our first presentation on this network, was to try a series of short segments throughout the day. And I just, I didn't like it. There's so much that has to be said. It's hard to put it into 15 minutes. And the truth is, I want to be able to do interviews. I want to be able to bring people into these conversations and then have some extended conversation about that. That's the whole pre-trial supervision discussion. I want to talk. I want to talk to you about these issues. And 15 minutes is just too hard. And if a person can't stop, every 15 minutes, I think it's going to be so much better and so much easier if we can do it in a single segment. And then if we can release it as an on-demand and listen to when you can segment on our website. And that's exactly what we have transformed this into. You have to forgive me. I keep bumping into my microphone. I'll have to move that. I thought I liked it better down there. I don't. If I turn, I hit it. And I don't know what it sounds like in the speaker. So here's where we're at. We are introducing our new program this evening. This is the new platform. It is the 8 p.m. Central Hour. It will discuss anything pretrial supervision discussion. We are talking about what it means to be accountable, what it means to protect, the Eighth Amendment, what it means to have the guarantee of innocent until proven guilty, and what it means to do this in a way that protects the general population. We cannot allow a criminal justice system to be built that rewards crime. And if it does, then it's going to turn us all into victims. We can't punish the honest. You can't have only the honest be punished. If you make a mistake, pay for it and move on. If you're career at it, pay for it and move on. But you can't just give people a pass. You can't pick out a piece of society or a geographical location and say because you live in these confines, you get a free pass. And much of the bail reform ordinances that have gone through many of America's cities do just that. The carve-outs that we see created by New Mexico and New Jersey, these constitutional dead zones. I mean, you can't do that, guys. You have to force a population to use a hidden, unaccountable, taxpayer-funded instrument called a risk assessment and never give any chance of society to review that. It's not legal. It's not constitutional. I'm not saying that I don't like the idea of using some kind of tool to assess risk. I think that there could be a lot of great opportunities for that, but I think it's up to the judge. The judge should be able to decide if they want to use this instrument, and it certainly should not be allowed to be used as a way to replace, the freedom of choice, of private choice. Once you get to that accelerated or advanced place in your criminal career to where your charges in history dictate that a judge needs to do something more, then I think that option needs to be made available. If you eliminate the private choice option, then the only option left is the government control option. And I would suggest to any American citizen to be very leery of that. That's not America. That's everywhere else. But in America, you have that private choice selection that makes such a huge difference. If we remove that ability, I don't think we're the same country. Now, I might be wrong. As we move forward, there's going to be a lot of discussion about associations. As I speak to bondsmen, I'm going to be speaking to an Oklahoma bondsman in the next few days. We've already agreed that would take place. I have a couple more Louisiana bondsmen that I'll be speaking with. I have a Maryland one who I like a lot. And they have great energy and great understanding. And we're going to speak with him. I want to make sure that we are talking with these bail agents, but I also want to recognize these associations. So these associations that are out there are so important. I mean, there's so many states that don't have any associations at all. There's some that have window dressing associations. There's some that have training type associations. And then there's some that have truly active associations, truly really hardcore active. And then there might be some that are kind of in between truly active hardcore and just training. Each association that exists today needs to improve, needs to always work to improve, needs to always work to better itself, to always be more efficient, more effective, more streamlined. Use less and provide more. So many of the times I see things that I can't disagree with, and I hate it, and I'm sorry. Let's see if I got it right here. We had a conversation earlier. I had a conversation with the bondsman, and his question was, or his statement was, I'm not real happy with my association. But they do have a great lobbyist, and they do a good job each year protecting us in Baton Rouge. So I make sure and do all my training for them. Well, what can that association do to make it better? Okay, what can it do to get him happier? He's happy enough to at least make sure and give you some revenue in the sense that he does his training through you. But what can you do to make him more energetic and to make him go, wow, man, I don't like what I just saw here, and be able to go to his association? How can, when a story gets released in the newspaper locally by, just an activist group, the SPLC, that makes an absolute false claim, why can the headline be so absolutely false and nobody from an association make a statement about that? There should have been an instant rebuttal. There should have been a request for a statement before it was ever put out there. And the fact that there wasn't there should have been a huge backlash that they dared to make a statement without even saying anything to the industry. But they're trying to negate the industry, and they're trying to negate the industry leadership, so they just ignore it. So they give you this appearance that each individual bondsman is individual and they're all criminal, and that there's no statewide association that regulates or helps to police, or there's no association that has a standards or an ethical standard. There's no anything. That there's just this bunch of free-for-all lunatic thieves. So they've eliminated your ability to even represent yourself as some kind of professional entity, even though you have an existing association. How is that possible? Even with all of the work you do each year in the legislature to make sure that the legislators know who you are and know what you do, and you work very hard and they do respect you, how is it that you've left the press uneducated about who you are and what you are, and allowed them to be so easily swayed by an unproven activist group to just shred you in the news? This is nationwide, folks. This isn't just in one state or one place. This is everywhere. And how have you done it? How have you allowed that to happen? These associations should be livid right now. I would say this. If I was the state of Louisiana's association, I would have released a press release within hours of seeing the story in the Advocate branding the bail agents as basically fraudsters, shucksters. I mean, I would also be getting with our association's legal advisors as to whether or not we can do something about the SPLC's blatant disregard of honesty. And then at the same time, I would want to harshly respond to the article itself and to the publisher and to the writer as to how unprofessional you are to not even seek the association's opinion. We don't set that price. That price is collected by the sheriff. Why did the press do nothing to get to the bottom of that? Why did they just go with the activists' agenda? The SPLC, whether you believe them or not, are they just the rule of law now? What they say is true? Everybody has a right to due process. Our industry does not. We just get pillaged and plundered by a news guy who took no time to even try to write anything that was truthful. Now, granted, I will tell you, he quoted me truthfully. He even made this, the Department of Insurance's single statement was, "I am correct." But why did you make your storyline so ugly? Nobody sees that. Nobody cares. You gave this impression that bail is rotten. You helped move the agenda. Why is the Advocate so willing to help move the agenda? Why are any news agencies willing? I go back to the constable who says it's about the money. I go back to the friend who's a career criminal for drinking and driving who says it's about the money. One says, the constable says, if we made it about the money and we started providing more money, the system would do a better job protecting us. It's been over 20 years since you provided them any infusion of cash. That's why you got to add more. 20 years ago, when they wanted to get rid of you, they did the same thing. You needed to give them an infusion of cash. And I'll say I disagree with that. I didn't think that's... is that the point of the 2%? Because we have to pay our government to not take our industry away? We have to give a piece of our industry to the legislators to keep them from legislating away our freedoms? To keep them from legislating away accountability? So we had to give up 2% or 2.5% or 3%. We had to add that to the overhead of this whole process just to stay in business? You mean to tell me accountability and freedom can be stripped away because they only see it as a business? Our government can just kill business because it won't give a piece of the business to the government? That's tough. That's a tough one to swallow. But that apparently is what we're at. I don't think bail goes away if people understood its value. If people understood its use, its need, its protection. Not only that it's protected by the Constitution, but that it protects the Constitution. It protects freedom. It protects America. It gives people that innocent till proven guilty. That private choice is your way away from the government. If we had educated everybody for generations in that truth, I don't think we would be here today. Bail's not an opportunistic game. Is there money in bail? Only because there's bail. If judges set bond and people bond out, then there's money in bail. But there's risk in bail. There's tremendous risk. There's huge liabilities. So I don't doubt that there's money in bail. And when you say you want to take the money out of bail, you're not taking it out. You're just transferring it from a place that actually has risk because of it and liability, and you're transferring it to a place that collects the money with no risk or no liability. That's all any of your pretrial risk scam programs do. They don't take the money out. They transfer it to different hands through different avenues, but the money's still there. They're just going to do it. It allows for them to make sure they collect more of their court stuff. It takes the competition away for the money. The courts want your money, and they can't compete with other people taking your money, so they're going to eliminate the private choice and make sure that all the money goes to the government. At the end of the day, that's what it truly ends up being. They're just trying to transfer the funds from one hand to the other. But in so doing, they're destroying, one, a private industry, two, a constitutional protection. And I'm not sure how that's possible. I can see adding a phase. I can see adding a risk assessment. Let's give them one more chance at freedom before it costs them personally. Or before, maybe with a lower cost. But I can't see them doing away with the private protection overall for this, for a risk assessment protection, and a guarantee that if they say you're a risk, you can't get out. No, we can't allow that. There's no preventative detention allowed in America, folks. Now, if we want to allow a carve-out for the heinous murderer or the child predator, maybe. I can agree with that. I hate the slippery slope thing, but I'm also reasonable. But you have to draw a line at one point and say, no, we're going to go with due process. It's something that makes us special. So our associations, I think, have to get better at information and education, which will allow for communication, or which is communication. Okay, so the NBAA is not designed to interfere with or take the place of or compete with the PBUS or the American Bail Coalition. If anything, we just want to be a voice. We want to help you project your voice. We want to help project the message. We want to help educate, inform. We want to create communication. That's why this program is called the Pretrial Supervision Discussion. There's been a lot of discussion in Louisiana. And Louisiana, I will tell you, has one of the better associations. Very active. Been very active for over 20 years. One of the early ones, if you ask me. It was very early in the sense that it got active early. And it stayed active for all of these years. And a lot of that, I can honestly say, is because of some very dedicated people. Guy Ruggiero is the president of the Association of Louisiana Bail Underwriters. There's other various board members that have been part of that group for many, many years and that have been very involved. And there's some that have been more involved than others, and some more involved today than others and yesterday than others. But the truth is I think that they all truly, truly, truly care deeply. And that they're trying desperately to become new. They're trying to have a new face, new brand, and I have so much respect for them for that. And it's nice to see it. It truly is. And there's some new faces that are there. Jill Dennis from A2I is there. She is a 14-year bondsman. She's recognized in bail. She's worked in all parts of bail. She's not as experienced as some of the other people there, but she's very well experienced. She's also, she's no longer in bail. She is the director of a source of solutions to bail locally in Louisiana. It's something that bail has worked on to provide solutions in certain jurisdictions to the court that reach beyond just a bond. In other words, electronic monitoring, drug testing, alcohol monitoring, things like that. And it brings people that normally are not making bond or whose bonds are much higher, and they're allowing them to make bond or to make lower bonds. but yet provide greater security to the court. So it's like a win-win for everybody. Defendant saves money, court, obviously saves space and is able to protect another person's rights to freedom while still protecting society from potentially another person who may miss court and cost the community. And now because of the added bonus of some kind of supervision through the surety, he might even be stopping them from committing new crimes like drugs or alcohol, or maybe by the use of curfews from being in the wrong place at the wrong time. So, to see the ALBU in Louisiana, they've worked for the last few months on a strategic plan, okay? And a great group, the Tapman Group, has helped them with that here in Louisiana. And Tapman has been with the Bail Association for a very long time, and they're good people. And this is a you call it SWOT, a strategic planning session type thing, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats identification plan. And what you do is you try to kind of sit down and go step by step through different things that can create solutions in your state. And let me give you an example. I'm going to, let me just read a couple. Strengths, legislative program, strong legislative program in the state of Louisiana through their association. They have good relationships. They have a great education program. They run the state's education program. They are the premier education program, and they do a fantastic job. The lady who runs that, her name is Karen, and she is so organized and so hardworking. It's unbelievable, and she's taken so much abuse over the years, yet she continues to do the job, and she does a fantastic job. And it is a huge source of revenue for the association, and that revenue is important when that association works so hard to protect bail, period. And there's so many reasons why we have to protect bail beyond profit. But they have their strengths are their experiences. Their membership is their strength, because there is a good membership. They're good at keeping regulatory issues, on the front burner so we can communicate about them. And there's some good communications. Obviously, they need a lot of work to expand. Not necessarily because they don't exist. They do have good communications. And funding, there's good funding. Look, I'm going to tell you, overall, one of the strengths is it's one of the better state-run organizations. The fact that they can identify that they need to improve is stunning. That just says so much for them as a group. And I'm proud to be, allowed to work with them. I can say that much. I can say that I'm proud to be allowed to have a moment. And I'm proud to work with them because their level of attempt to try exceeds that of so many places. And it's so important. I think every state could learn from this strategic plan that was developed in Louisiana that is being used as we speak. This is the plan that's in place right now. Threats, pretrial, programs that are misleading, anti-bail organizations, risk assessments that are destructive to freedom and accountability, unaccountable third-party vendors, the anti-bail education of legal entities, these criminal justice courses on hate bail, the media. The media is very damaging to us these days. Other bail agents and their bad business practices give a bad taste to everybody. People that don't care. I don't care about all that. What do I care about that? I don't get in trouble. The legislative sessions can be tough. Litigation, all the lawsuits filed by the activists. And then I'm going to tell you some of these surety companies, some of these insurance companies. Some of these insurance companies can be as bad as some of the bondsmen. Some of the weaknesses can be, communication. We don't have a great communication scheme with the judicial branch, and it's something that I think all bail needs to improve. If you don't get talking to these judges, these clowns that hate you are. And they're doing it at all levels. And these lawyers are part of the problem right now because it seems like there's been a large dose of hate the bail bondsman class going on in law school. So, it's important that we get out there and start to reach out. The public, we've got to talk to the public. We've got to get our state memberships up and get more bondsmen involved. You can't let the bondsman sit there and say, there's nothing I can do about it. If it's going to change, it's going to change. I can't stop it. We can't let that happen. I'm sorry. We can't let that happen. There is a lot of opportunities for us, okay? I like that this thing goes on and it talks about, objectives that were identified. And this really is a fantastic way to approach these problems that we're facing in the American bail industry today. This, the top 4 areas of focus, top 3 areas of focus: communication, relationship, and memberships. I think that's very important. Communications, external and internal, is what I call that. External is so important because there's so many different aspects of external. You can have a conversation with the judicial branch, a conversation with the legislative branch, a conversation that's separate for each, a conversation that's the same for each. You can have a conversation with the public, the clergy. You can have a conversation with the media. There's so many conversations. You have to be able to start to educate people in how important private choice is to freedom and to accountability and to innocent until proven guilty. And that's important. And if we don't get on that, then I think we're going to continue to lose ground because people got this misconception that bail is all opportunistic. It's not. This is not about opportunism over somebody's incarceration. This is the guarantee for those whose charges in history require it. So it goes into detail. Goal 1, communications. Develop and improve the communications program of the association. Develop communications for parties in the criminal justice system. 2, develop communications for community groups. 3, increase media awareness of the association's efforts and meaning. And then that breaks that down. Develop a narrative of the bail industry in Louisiana. Research potential partnerships with public relations firms. Explore earned media opportunities. Schedule meetings with editorial boards for newspapers in Louisiana. Assign a committee to send letters to the editor. These are fantastic step-by-step potential solutions to create a scheme, a process. What is it titled here? A strategic plan for the association to become a more modern, more streamlined, more advanced, and more efficient program that protects accountability and freedom in the state of Louisiana. This is a very important process. And I think without it, in time, enough conversations will be held vilifying private choice and the commercial surety and the protection of freedom and accountability that it provides that you will see an end to bail in Louisiana, in Mississippi, in Arizona, in Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Indiana, and everywhere else. If they have used misunderstanding, misconception to get constitutional amendments in 2 states. Huge margins voted for those amendments. They didn't vote for those amendments because they knew what preventative detention was. They didn't, and that's in the case of New Jersey. They didn't vote for that because they saw a catch and release system that they have now in New Mexico. The New Mexico system's on fire. And so many people in the system are denying that, saying it works just fine. It don't work just fine. It's a mess. It's a disaster. And it's getting people killed, including some of the accused. We have a lady in New Jersey who is distraught over her daughter. And it's not for any other reason than prior to the destruction of accountability and freedom in New Jersey, the mom could have actually, through her own choice, and because of the history and the charges of the daughter, used the jail to keep her daughter out of more trouble and to keep her daughter from doing more drugs. But because they refuse to keep her and they just keep rolling her back out, she just makes the hole deeper by getting into more and more trouble and using more and more drugs. So in other words, the mom believes that if she could have just said, you know what, I'm not bonding her out, I'm going to leave her in the jail, that this girl would not have gotten new charges and not have gotten deeper into drugs. So is that true? I know a lot of families that use jail as a way to give a person time out. And if you take that away, that's a huge piece of those families' security. They certainly lose control of one more aspect. Where before, at least then they had certain levels of control. Some would argue, well, that's not real fair. You're not the one caught with the drug addict stealing out of your purse or cleaning out your closets or victimizing the children or themselves or the neighbors or whoever. You're not the one who's looking at your daughter at 80 plus pounds, be on her last throes. And if you could just get her in jail for a week or two or a month or two, maybe you could save her. You're not the one. Trust me. Because if you were, you wouldn't be fighting to take away one more piece of control. There's so many more uses. To try to compact the whole conversation in and say money bail's bad, I would agree. I might think you are valid if you agreed that money defense is worse. We are the American bail agent. It is our job to make sure that people charged with crimes, pretrial, whose charges and history may require it, appear in court. When they can't just be turned loose for whatever reason, it should be our job, and it is, to ensure that they can be turned loose responsibly, accountably, because that protects the freedom that is inherent in our country, that freedom that makes us different, that freedom that makes us special. It's not so easy to just say, oh, it's not fair to hold a person just because they can't pay. That's not why they're being held. Very few people in America are held simply because they cannot pay. Almost all of them are held for much more valid reasons. When they are being held simply because they cannot pay, and it's not because the charges in history have made the bond deliberately to where they cannot pay it, it's just because they're poor and they're becoming a victim of that bond, then I think everybody in America, including the bail agents, think that needs to stop. Change that. Don't let that happen. Don't let anybody sit in jail for that. Make sure that there's plenty of hearings and plenty of opportunity to have that conversation so we don't see people being victimized solely by their bond. This is the NBAA.US radio. Thanks for joining me tonight. I will see you again tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Central, for the pretrial supervision discussion. NBAA.US radio. Tell your friends. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Talk to you tomorrow.